Hello and welcome to Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer. I'm your host, Jeff Seltzer, and we've made it to episode 37 in a row. Not really, but anyway, if you get the reference, that's great. Otherwise, go watch Clerks. In any event, really excited that we've made it 37 episodes. As a reminder from the last couple of weeks, after this episode, I'll be taking about a month off, as my month of April is super booked. Some work travel, some personal travel, lots of really cool stuff coming up, which I'm sure I'll be talking about in future episodes. Obviously, spring break is coming up, so taking a little trip with the family and the kids. Additionally, in late April, my daughters, who are both in marching band and orchestra, will be performing at Disney World. So they'll be walking down Main Street performing, which, I mean, as a Disney geek for myself and my wife, it's a huge dream to watch our daughters march down Main Street in Magic Kingdom. It'll be a lot of fun. So really excited for that. Not sure if anybody's heard, Universal Studios Hollywood actually over the next couple of weeks has something called Fan Fest, where they have a lot of really cool stuff for Back to the Future, Star Trek, some other kinds of, let's say, sci-fi geekery that we're super into. So we'll be taking a trek out there for a couple of days. And then lastly, as a lot of people may or may not know, Universal Studios Orlando has a brand new park opening up in late May called Epic Universe. I'm really excited about it. I've been waiting years and years for it to open. It's finally opening. Supposedly, it's going to be much larger than either of the two existing main parks they have there, Nintendo World, Monsters World, How to Train Your Dragon. So really excited. I'm taking one of my daughters to go hang out there for a couple of days in June. So lots of really cool stuff coming up. I'm sure I'll have some episodes that are devoted specifically to these ideas, trips, and functions. Really exciting. If you have any really cool stuff coming up, definitely shoot me a note. Let me know. I would love to hear about some of your cool trips coming up. Definitely shoot me a note or a DM via Instagram at Everybody Has a Story Pod. My personal Instagram is at Seltzer77. As a reminder, this show is sponsored by the good friends over at JeffSeltzer.com. For all of your Jeff Seltzer needs, go check out JeffSeltzer.com. Beyond that, you can email the show directly at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. If you have a business thing you want to send me, a picture, just some notes or whatever, feel free to shoot me something over via the email there. As a reminder, we are available on all podcast platforms. We are on video on Spotify, as well as video on YouTube at Everybody Has a Story Pod. We are on all other podcast platforms, audio only. So again, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Pandora. If there's a podcast platform, we're probably on there. So definitely check us out. Tell all of your friends and family to go check it out. Let them know. We have 37 episodes now, which is pretty cool. So there's definitely a topic for everybody. I would never suggest anybody goes back to episode 1 and listen straight through. Find a topic you like, listen to it, let me know what you think, shoot me a note, and kind of go from there. Additionally, 2 more things I want to bring up before I bring on my awesome guest for the week. So first of all, we are approaching the 1-year anniversary of this podcast, which for me is a huge moment. It was right around this time last year that I believe I was a guest on a podcast that kind of gave me the inspiration to start my own podcast. I told myself I would start a podcast by the end of 2025. This was like April or May of last year. And here we are, in April of 2025, and I'm already almost a year into it. So definitely, moving the goalposts on myself, I guess you can say, exceeding my goals, but trying to push harder and see what else I can do. Working on something special and something fun for the 1-year anniversary of this podcast. So please stay tuned for that. Additionally, back in January, not sure if you guys remember, I did a live podcast at a professional wrestling show, Pro Wrestling Junkie. So they're doing their second show, I believe, on July 26th at the Mecca at Ridgefield Park, New Jersey. So I'm looking to do a repeat sponsorship of that show. Once again, sponsor a match, hopefully a women's match to show my daughters once again that, women's wrestling is fantastic wrestling, women empowerment and all that kind of stuff. I'm a feminist at heart. So I'm once again looking to see if I can record live at the show again. So last time I did 17 interviews over the course of 5 hours. It was exhausting, but it came out amazing. Really, really excited about it. Definitely some learnings. My buddy Daniel will probably be there with me again as well. We'll see if we can get some repeat wrestlers, some new wrestlers, some fans, some random people who are there, whatever else like that. Just have some fun. So be on the lookout for that. Definitely check them out at pwjcards.com. Again, coming soon in July, hoping to repeat it again, and we'll see what happens. With that said, I did want to introduce my guest for this week. My old buddy, my old manager actually from work is Jissan. Jissan, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Jeff. Congratulations on coming up on a year. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Lots of congratulations going your way too, but we'll get into that in a moment. First of all, for anybody who doesn't know who Jissan is, I mentioned before, I did directly work for Jissan at the company I work for, the company he used to work for. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I did want to give Jissan a little bit of an opportunity to kind of give some background on himself and to tell the audience who is Jissan.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Jeff. So the first thing is I heard Daniel Ireland has been on here 3 times, so I needed to start getting my numbers up. So that's obviously the real reason why I'm here. This is number 1. It's also good to be guest number 37, right? So it's kind of cool to have, an episode number assigned to me. But really, my name is Jissan Cherian. I've been playing in the corporate space from technology to strategy consulting, and then we've been living in the CPG consumer healthcare world for a little while. I basically am just an avid basketball card fan. I love wrestling from back in the day. And there's a lot of different things that you've been getting into over the last few episodes that just reminded me of what it was like to be young again. So, I thought, hey, let me find a way to get into this conversation. We can talk about work. We can talk about personal branding, what I've been up to. But basically, after 20 years, decided that I'm going to retire. And by the way, when I say retire, it's like how Michael Scott declared bankruptcy, right? It's like, I told the company that I'm retiring from corporate America, but, I just a little past 40. So it's like I have a little bit of time to go. But basically, I decided that I'm going to take the 20 years of experience that I've had and start to build my own little shop and start my own company, right? So I'm sure we'll get into it, but DVERSFY is basically a dream come true in terms of just doing the stuff that I love to do and doing it on my own terms.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I appreciate you sharing all that. So thank you so much. What I will say is kind of funny is, you talk about listening to my podcast and kind of, revisiting, I guess, what you did when you were younger. It's funny because at 47 years old, like it's an interesting point in life, right? Like it's a point where I kind of have the resources to live out my fantasies, right? Like I can go to WrestleMania because I have the money for it, right? Or I can buy the action figures and the cards that I couldn't as a kid. But at the same time, I'm 47 years old. So it's kind of like, do I have to justify myself to people during that? It's just kind of a weird point in life. I'm kind of in the, I don't want to curse, I'll say the F it attitude, and the fact that like, if it makes me happy, I go for it, right? I don't necessarily look to see, hey, do people expect it or accept it? I mean, there's lots of really weird and random like niche like Facebook groups and such of like-minded people who have similar kinds of interests and thoughts that, it's just weird because it ranges people from like 18 to like even like 60 or 70. So some of us are just kids at heart, and it just kind of helps us, enjoy life, I guess, right?
It's always so funny. I don't want to admit how long I thought wrestling was real for until I finally realized this is all scripted. And it was, it was probably much longer than I needed to kind of admit to it. But yeah, I mean, the best part was, watching Nitro and watching Raw and flipping between those channels. And it's like, oh my God, this is happening. Right. And, I eventually, grew up and became an adult to some degree and disconnected from it. But it's one of those things where as soon as someone starts talking about it, it's awesome. Right. And, basketball cards is another thing that I've been into my entire life. Started off with like X-Men cards and then eventually just became Michael Jordan cards. And
nice.
Yeah, so when you guys talk about, PSA grading and, shenanigans with Mark Andrews in terms of computers and, what it was like. Yeah, it's all these things, man. It's like, this is a cool little carving of culture.
Very nice. Very nice. Cool. And before we go any further, also, I do want to say, Justin, so to be completely honest and transparent, like, when you say that, obviously we're going to talk about your leadership style and things that you do, like the fact that, and this is probably me revealing a little too much behind the curtain here, you took a chance on me years ago, which was fantastic. So for those of you that don't know, the company that I currently work at, at the time I was in a role that I wasn't necessarily enamored with. There was a restructure of sorts, and the role that I was in wasn't really the role that I signed up for. Jissan on his team had a secondment, which basically means you can kind of temporarily take over a role, oftentimes for either maternity coverage or whatever else like that. And my manager sent it to me at the time, and he was like, hey, would you be interested? And I'm looking at it, I was like, well, it's in marketing. I don't have any true marketing experience, right? I've done lots of different things. I have an MBA in marketing, but I've never actually worked in marketing. And it was a brand manager level role, so definitely it was a little bit more senior. Kind of a role that if I went to a different company, there's no way I would have got my foot in the door with. Jissan didn't really care, though. He looked at it, he saw my resume, he met me, and he was like, let's give Jeff the opportunity, let's give it a shot. And I learned a lot from the role, learned a lot from working for Jissan. So it's one of those things where, good leadership, I think, is leaning in a little bit, giving people opportunities that they wouldn't necessarily have other places and, investing time and effort. And for me, it was invaluable. I mean, I learned a lot about marketing. I got a lot of experiences. I mean, in honesty, I learned that I really don't want to be a marketer longer term. But with that said, I did get a good 18 months out of, a marketing role between that role and another role that I took right after that. So for me, it's one of those things where, like, in my current role, I look, as I talked to Tina Tonelli a few weeks ago, and I can look at it and say, okay, I have marketing experience. I've done certain things. When I work with marketing folks, I know what they're experiencing. Like, I know their mindset and their perspective. So for me, it just helps to both influence as well as to empathize with what they're going through and kind of how to get to where they want to get to. So thank you again, Jissan.
No, I really appreciate you saying that, Jeff. And I think when I think about one of the reasons why I decided to kind of spin off and do my own thing, it was because of people like you, right? It's people took bets on me. There was a time where I was doing my first marketing gig, and I was trying to break into it for a little while before I got my MBA and got the opportunity at the company that we were working for, right? But I always value people that are willing to try new things that, and what we do is always like a risk assessment in terms of like, okay, he's coming in with a bunch of experience. I know marketing, so I can be his, safety net, and we can go and figure things out. And I think it was more important that we just enjoyed working together. And absolutely. I think, when you work with people for so long, or you're a part of a team, it's more important about the culture fit. The knowledge will always be there because you got smart people all around you. It's just a matter of whether or not they've done it before, right? So yes. Credit to you, man. I know your personal brand is going out there and, getting a bunch of experiences and being comfortable in all types of functions and things like that. And I see you continue to do that. So it's, you're still true to your brand as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jissan. So with that said, real quick, I guess, history lesson here. So as mentioned, I think Jissan mentioned earlier, you were in corporate America for roughly 20 years, right? You've worked across lots of different companies, lots of different categories, even different countries, I guess, as we can get into a little bit later. So I guess my biggest question is, because for me, I'm, let's say, a little more risk averse, right? So for me, I, obviously working for corporate America, there's nice things about it. You've got bonuses, we've got 401k. At certain levels, you have guaranteed stock and things like that. So before getting into the company that you obviously started and you're working in now, take me through your mindset of when you decide, you know what, I've done a lot of different things. I'd like to kind of leave and walk away from, whatever this, they call them the golden handcuffs, I guess, that are kind of like holding you there to kind of like take that risk or take that jump to do something else on your own.
Yeah, it's not easy making these kind of decisions, right? But when I look back, I've done it a few different times. So I started my career at a big tech company out on the West Coast, loved it. It was one of those things where I graduated from undergrad and I started my first job and I never needed to change my wardrobe because basically whatever I was wearing in college was cool to work, at that place. And it was like, this is a dream come true. After about 3 years, the repetitiveness of the tech world and where I found myself was more doing IT support and, server administration, coding, all that stuff that I thought that I wanted to do. And I wanted to break into marketing. And as soon as someone told me that I couldn't, I was ready to kind of move on. And I think that's kind of the reoccurring theme in terms of I kind of know what I want. And if I can't find it, I'm willing to bet on myself on I will find it, right? So I jumped from a tech company to a big strategy consulting company. I worked there for 2 years, but I still had this itch for marketing. So in the midst of, a huge recession in 2009, I decided to go and hide out at B school, spent a couple of years at Carnegie Mellon, got branded as a marketer just because I took some courses. But, it was one of those things that I finally was able to get into like that marketing gig. 13 years at the company we were talking about, right? So I got an opportunity to start in the US. I moved over to Vietnam, worked on a cool business development opportunity in Vietnam where, one of the things that I always think about is the previous role that I had as an associate brand manager. I was working on the Aquafresh brand, which is an awesome, small little brand. And it was, about $60-70 million, in terms of the size of responsibility. And when I went to Vietnam, the total size of that business was nearing $2 million. And all of a sudden you start to feel a sense of like, well, is this a step back? Is it not? And what I realized was that, hey, when is the chance to, work in Vietnam ever going to come up again? Let me go ahead and take this on. And what I realized is that when you go into some of these places where there's less resources, less data, you are responsible for doing a lot more. And you might get the sense that, as you move from role to role, sometimes you're doing it because you just get a chance to touch something that you haven't had a chance to touch before. So when I was in Vietnam, we were literally launching 3 brands to Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. We were looking at what's the realities of like how big this business can be. one of the cool things we had to do was pull up a map of Cambodia and see where the paved roads were, because that would dictate distribution, right? It's like, that's not something you get when you work in a big traditional market. So it was just cool to be able to do that. There was no finance department to build my financials. I had to figure it out. I had to learn these things. And then I went over to Central and Eastern Europe. I lived in Poland, Warsaw, which was amazing. And that was a regional role. And then went and got my sales experience at Walmart. And then I went over and was part of the marketing leadership team for so long. It's comfortable, man. And you get used to that direct deposit. You get used to those wonderful benefits. But
nice.
Yeah, it is. And, I hit 40 and I was thinking that, okay, am I just going to keep doing the same thing for the next 10 years? Or I have this itch to kind of want to break out on my own. So I basically said, okay, if you've done all these experiences, it feels unique. Not a lot of people have had the track record that I had in terms of being able to see tech and strategy consulting and CPG marketing. I was like, let's bring it all together and like head on out, right? So I literally, told the company that I'm going to head out. It was rough to delete the direct deposit from my bank account because, there's a reoccurring thing in the calendar. And then all of a sudden it's like, all right, if I wake up and go get it, I can go get it, or I can sleep in and not get anything that day, right? So there's a very real thing there. But no, I think it's been probably more rewarding than anything else because I have the freedom to go after whatever it is that I think is the next right thing for me. And there's no one dictating what that next move is, which is kind of freeing and also scary, but it's also motivating.
So lots to unpack there. So let me get through a couple of things here. But again, thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. So obviously you mentioned that you worked in Vietnam. You also worked in Poland at one point.
Yeah. That's right.
I have a very different story in the fact that I've lived in Jersey for 97% of my life. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, moved to Chicago, moved back to Brooklyn, but I've been in Jersey since I was like 5 years old, right? So at this point, at 47, you're talking, 42 years of math is close enough. It's probably good. Versus, yourself, you left the country. People that I work with moved to Bentonville or moved to Minneapolis, whatever else like that, right? So, for me, I've basically worked up and down central North Jersey, not quite the amount of miles you've gotten. In terms of, obviously making a life decision to move, not just out of state, but out of country, like, how does your family take to that? Like, I assume, and again, I don't necessarily know enough, like, were you attached, unattached? What do your parents think of that kind? And your siblings, whatever else like that? Like, what does that kind of look like for you? And like, how do you make a decision to say, I'm going to move halfway around the world from everything that I know?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I have an awesome partner. So my wife and I got married literally a year before we started working at this company. So when I was in ABM, I was also freshly married. I had just graduated from B school. So everything was open in terms of, the freedom to move around. We didn't have kids yet or anything like that. And it was literally one of those opportunities that came up as, hey, we have a rotation. And, back then it was a little bit easier to be able to move, between markets and stuff like that. But basically they said, okay, it's Vietnam. We don't know anyone that's been out there. And by the way, once I landed there, I found out I was the very first American from the consumer healthcare business that was ever in that office, right? So you think about all this, the cultural dynamics, they have a vision of what an American looks like based on movies and what they've seen in like media, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff happening. But no, I think it was more, look, we talked to our parents, we talked to our family members, we said, we want to do this. This is a cool opportunity. We're not sure if we're ever going to do it. My wife and I were cool with the idea of living somewhere abroad. So there wasn't anything scary about it.
Okay.
I will tell you though, when we went to our doctors and told them that we're moving to Vietnam, they basically gave us a year's supply of malaria medicine.
Oh, wow.
And it's pills. And I asked him, I'm like, do you know anyone who's taken malaria medicine for 365 days? He was like, no, nobody. I was like, so should I be doing this? And he was like, I guess, it's like, good luck. Here's your immunization. So
that's a pretty good insurance that we have if it'll cover 360 malaria pills, right?
Yeah. That's exactly right. So my wife and I had a ridiculous amount of malaria pills because we were not sure of what to do. And we basically landed there and, lo and behold, it was amazing. Right. And I think we had the perspective of we're going to make this amazing.
Of course.
You go grocery shopping and you don't know what the meats are that are laid out there. Right. And you're trying to remember the word for chicken and beef and stuff like that. You're also trying to decide between let's go traditional and let's go out and eat and may or may not get sick depending on, how comfortable our stomachs are with the local cuisine. But, it was like one of those things where it's like, when are we ever going to be able to do this? And I think we've heard...
Real quick, based on my math also, this was earlier before smartphones also. So it's not like you can walk into a store with Google Translate and say, like, I went to Japan last year and wasn't the easiest, but at least Google Translate helped me get by. Right. For you at this point, you are completely out of your element, I'd imagine. To your point, translation.
We literally got kids' books from our translator where it was like pictures, like cartoon images of a chicken and like the word next to it. And it wasn't a small discrete book. It was like, we looked ridiculous. We had like coloring books in front of us and we were like, this one, do you have this? Amazingly, my wife picked up Vietnamese much faster than I did. She had to, because, she wasn't working in a corporate environment. She had to like live there.
Right.
I was able to hide out from 9 to 5 in a corporate environment where emails are still done in English, brainstorming and discussions in the office are still done. So I was skirting away with not needing to learn as much Vietnamese. I did learn enough to be able to say left, right in a taxi, because, they're sending you on your way and you need to be able to give direction in terms of where you're trying to go. But
absolutely. Yeah. Nice. That's awesome. Again, like for me, I've left North America once to go to Japan last year. I can't even fathom the idea of leaving the country for years at a time. But that's, different lifestyles, different mindsets, different backgrounds, just, different strokes for different folks, I guess. So again, that all led you to, as you said before, you worked overseas, you came back to the US eventually, did a lot of amazing work for the company that I currently work for. And then eventually, as you said before, you finally realized it was probably time to, call it a day professionally for corporate America and start doing your own thing. So as you mentioned earlier, you are the founder and president of a company called DVERSFY. So for those of you that aren't watching the video, that's DVERSFY, DVERSFY. Obviously, for branding purposes, it's easier than putting an I in there because you can't own that. But this is something in theory you can own.
Right. That's exactly right. Good trademark law.
Yes. So if for those of you that don't know, and for myself, I barely know also, what is DVERSFY and like what is it that you do in this company that you've created?
Yeah. So, as any good brand person would do, first you build the brand and then you figure out what you want to do with that asset. Right. So I basically had this dream of diversification. Like I've always been involved in getting a bunch of random experiences, and similar to you, right? I think there's value in learning from being uncomfortable. So whether it's living in Vietnam or Poland or going into sales or trying new things in marketing, my big thing was always, okay, I have this really wide perspective on things because of all the experiences I got. Let's go and deliver that kind of experience out to the next generation, right? So basically what I did was I took inventory of what I love about working. I also took inventory of what didn't give me a lot of energy at work. And I basically just filtered out and said, okay, I'm going to build a company that only focuses on the cool stuff, right? So DVERSFY is the brand. There's 2 companies underneath it. DVERSFY Management is basically a small business consulting firm. So I work with founders and startups that are essentially trying to enter into the consumer healthcare space. So if I think about all the experience that I've had, I've worked in the industry. A lot of my clients right now are actually in the AI space. So there's a lot of AI tools. There's a lot of smart, founders and startup folks that want to enter into the space, but may have not had any experience working in the space. So when they approach these companies, they need a little bit of credibility. They need a little bit of trust. And I work with them to develop their brand strategies, their marketing. I was recently at, CHIPA, the SLS conference, and I was presenting alongside a CEO for an AI company that I'm working with now. And it was kind of cool to see our former colleagues sitting in the audience, very kind, and being able to kind of talk about how AI can now influence all this work. And because I've done the work, I'm speaking from a very genuine place. I'm not trying to sell anyone, because I can genuinely say if I was still working, here's how I would implement these AI tools, right? So that's DVERSFY Management. It's very nuts and bolts. It gets the job done. The other company is called DVERSFY Leadership. And this is the one that's really my passion project. So when I was, working with all of you guys, and maybe you saw this in terms of how I managed and led teams, but development conversations, one-on-ones, that was, where I got my energy, right? So I love running brands and businesses, but spending time with you and understanding what you're trying to get out of your role and curating the projects to make sure they meet your needs, and thinking about our individual team members and what their personal brand should be within this huge entity that we work at. That's cool, right? So I basically have started, and this is actually something that I never thought I would do, but I actually kept all my notes in terms of like the literal notebooks that I've had from all three of the companies for, decades.
Sure.
I went back and I looked through those pages and those notes of what I wrote to myself. And there was times where I was very young and I was saying, when I become a manager, I'm going to be like this. And I wrote down, here's the things that motivate me. And lo and behold, I was doing it, right? So I started, highlighting and going back through all my notes, and I'm writing a book. So I'm putting together a leadership book in terms of how do we think about personal branding? How do you build, diverse, inclusive teams, and basically taking the wealth of knowledge and putting it down on paper. And then, the other thing I do is executive coaching. I do a lot of mentorship and coaching as well. So some of those conversations that I loved having as an employee, now I have them as clients. So, it's basically, I think at the company that we were at, there was the what and the how,
right?
In terms of like, so diversify management is the what, diversify leadership is the how, right? And I found this cool way of kind of having these two pieces of businesses, and who knows, maybe the diversify brand will have other entities underneath it one day, right? But yeah, it's been fun.
Nice. Yeah. And what I'll say too is, I mean, this is a very authentic business for you as well, right? It's not like you just woke up one day and said, hey, I want to be like this, whatever, right? Like I'll say again, out of experience, like I mentioned earlier, you went out of your way to mentor and to lead and help out other people in your previous corporate America job. You were a part of ERGs or employee resource groups. Like you definitely believed it and you lived it. So the fact that, you basically spun off and you're doing this on your own now, I think is fantastic. It's, again, authentic, as I said before. It's something that truly is Jissan, which is amazing to see.
No, that's awesome to hear, man, because that's what you would hope for, right? Is when you take a bold step like that, you hope that people see the vision and what you're trying to get done. It's hard. I got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old at home, right? And, there's a real reality around like this stuff's got to work and it's got to pay the bills too. It can't just be fun and passion project. Luckily, we're finding the middle ground there of all of it. So it's been fun.
Absolutely. So it sounds like you're obviously doing a lot of different things. You've got 2 different businesses. You've got a bunch of different clients and such. Are you largely a one-person show at this point, or do you have like reps or staff, or kind of like what does that look like at this point?
No, I got 2 immature colleagues at 4 and 7-year-old, right?
You're interns. I get it.
Yeah. They got focus problems, right? But we're working on it. But no, man, it's just me. It's literally, because it's only been about 7 months as well. Okay. So it was really recent. It was just last summer that I decided to make the jump. I took a few months to myself and just kind of relaxed. And then I was like, all right, we should probably start, filing for this trademark and start putting up a website and getting some business going. So, it's still fairly new. So it's just myself. I do have wonderful people around me in terms of they're always asking if I'm hiring, which is always like a really nice compliment to hear.
Of course.
Also, I cannot afford anyone, so it's awesome, to hear that. But no, I think right now it's literally, a one-man show.
I get it. I mean, on a much smaller scale, I mean, this podcast is a one-man show. So,
yeah.
Obviously we're doing very different things. You're making money and I'm, putting out podcasts and, hoping people listen to it. But like, I mean, I get it, right?
Sponsor, right? I definitely heard a sponsor there at the beginning. So it's
yeah, that's right. Marcus and Daniel over at JeffSeltzer.com are the official sponsors of this podcast. JeffSeltzer.com for all your Jeff Seltzer needs. Yeah. So what I was going to say was like, I mean, you and I both been in corporate America for decades, and like, there definitely is frustration at times where, if you're not a one-man show, obviously, corporate America is all about, collaboration, working with others. But oftentimes you're just told by higher ups, just do this. It does not matter, right? So no matter how much heart and soul you put into something, at the end of the day, if they're like, this is just the way to do it, it can get frustrating at times. I'd imagine like similar to my podcast, for you, you are the CEO, you are the analyst, you are from top to bottom to top, right? So at the end of the day, whatever decision you make is on you, and you can have all the facts and the data. And for the most part, nobody's going to come in and supersede you and say, don't do it just because. Like, it's on you. You live and die by your decisions here, which has to be empowering.
Yeah, it is. And it's what you would hope for, right? And luckily we're getting paid, we're happy, I will tell you, it's nice not to be in the 9 to 5 meetings back to back, and then trying to figure out what was I trying to get done when I walked into the office, right? So there is this really nice, I can work during the day, and and it's very reasonable, and and when I want to go and spend time with my kids, I can. when it's time to go pick them up and, be a supportive partner. That's awesome too. So yeah, it gives me a little bit of flexibility, but it feels good that I felt like I put in the time, and I kind of earned a little bit of a break here. So
absolutely. And I assume you're not dealing with corporate politics or corporate gossip because it's just you, right? There's no mandating 5 days a week in the office because, I mean, you'd be telling yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
Not sure if you remember, but I think it was probably about a month into working for you that the office literally attacked me. Legitimately, this was like, I guess, mid-COVID or something. I was walking through a door, I had my mask on. And for those of you that don't know how these door locks work, basically the doors have a slash card. You have to slash the card, and then the magnet at the very top like unlocks and door opens. Well, weirdly, when I slashed the card, the magnet at the top of the door just dropped straight down and slammed me in the head. I might have been concussed. I do have a picture of a black eye and a bruise on my face from it. I remember coming back to my desk, and I was probably out of it. And people are looking at me like what just happened? Like, was he in a fight club in the basement? Or
I literally remember you holding a bag of ice to your head. And I was like, I know you're coming into marketing, but I never thought it would be this rough, right? But I do remember, there was this little bit of, hey, is there a liability concern here? And I'm just going to go check on him and make sure he's good. And we're just going to continue on. But yeah, that was...
I mean, again, this is something you don't have to deal with at home, I assume. Your house is your house. You don't have to worry about your building attacking you. But it's one of those things where, like, I still have the picture of myself with the black eye on. I find it funny. It's also a weird time.
I will tell you, though, working in this situation, we do cry over spilled milk because literally we have spilled milk.
I'm the 47-year-old. I'd imagine so.
And there are tears, right? So, there's things like that. And again, I got really immature coworkers. So
I gotcha. I mean, what do you do? Like dock them cereal or no treats?
Exactly.
Or we're not going to wherever place you're going to go to.
That's
and stuff
exactly
like that.
right. Yeah,
cool.
you cut off some of the screen time. That's the key.
I guess so. I mean, nice thing also is, I guess, with your own business, when your laptop starts sucking, you just buy a new laptop. You don't have to go to IT and justify it and sell it. You want the new iPhone, you get the new iPhone. It's just the way that it is, right? You're the approver. It's on you, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
What I did also want to ask you about was, so I saw on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, you do have a bit of a like a video podcast or a newsletter series. I would say your co-host name, but I'm probably butchering it. So maybe you can give a little background on what it is, how to find it, and how this came together.
No, I appreciate you saying that, right? So it's still really new, but my co-host, John G., so she is Hungarian. She's someone out of Central and Eastern Europe that I had met when I was in Poland. So if we think back to our corporate world, she was the head of HR when I was the head of the marketing director for the region, and we were part of the same leadership team. So we kind of, went on our own ways. We worked together for quite some time. It was during some of the joint ventures and transitions that our companies had gone through back in the day. So we lived through some of those experiences. And then they came back to the US and she went on with her roles. When I decided to kind of make the announcement that I'm retiring and starting my own gig, I found out that she had done something similar a couple of years earlier. So she's a career coach now. She works with people kind of in like their mid-career crisis, right? So imagine people that are very senior, they're now trying to figure out what they do next. She's helping them in that space. We jumped on a coffee call just to be like, hey, here's what I'm up to, here's what, and we started reminiscing. We started talking about careers, personal development, what does it mean to have purpose in your career? And what we realized is like, we should probably hit record and we should probably just record our conversation because both of us have clients. I'm working with people that are a little bit earlier in their career. She's working with people that are kind of further along in their career, but they're very similar challenges and they're just variations of the same problems, right? So we started saying, okay, I think there's something here. So we literally brought our minds together. We're not as polished as you. So you have like names on the screen and there's like a background and you're on every platform. We're just on YouTube. We literally jump on a Zoom call. We talk real, raw. It's literally, the kind of stuff that you would hope to hear from HR and from a manager when you think about personal development, when you think about how to decide what to do with your career. And the name of the podcast is the Own It or Quit It podcast. So it's literally this idea that you are in control of your career. If you don't like it, you got to figure out how you're going to make it better, or you're going to move on and you're going to be happier for it. So it's either own your career or quit your career. And we literally give stories about what we've done in our past. We just put out an episode around purpose and how do you find purpose in your career. And there's a few other stuff that we got planned. But, I think our safety net is we called it a limited series because we weren't sure how far it was going to go. But, the praise has been awesome. People have been following a lot more than we expected. And there's something here. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Which is awesome. I mean, I think you're 6 episodes in so far. Is that
yeah,
right?
That's right. 6? That's right. Not 37.
Not 30. You're going to get there, though. What I'll say is this. When I first got into the podcast, I was told that most podcasts don't go beyond 10 episodes. So the fact that you're already 60% of the way to, I guess, that benchmark, I think it's a solid mark, right? I mean, as I'm sure you would say to me, don't limit yourself. Just kind of do as much as you want to, as much as can be fun or productive, and keep going with it. So what I will say, and I'll offer this up if you'd like, I know you're only on YouTube. I could very easily, and I'd offer my services to help you guys syndicate it out across all the different podcast platforms. It's audio there. Without getting too deep into it, you take the video file, you drop it in Spotify. I've got it set up now so that way it syndicates across every other podcast platform. And basically, it takes 5 minutes, if that, to get it across every podcast platform.
You know what? That might have to be kind of the next step on this thing because we didn't want to sign up for anything that was hard. We were just like, we're just going to talk and whoever listens, they'll find us. But I appreciate that, man. I'm going to take you up on that offer.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, in honesty, you're doing all the work as it is. Like once you have that video file, and again, I'm sure half my audience has said, I don't really care anymore. But like you take the video file, you're already doing a write-up for it. So 98% of the work is already done. The first time it's a setup, but then after that, it just does its thing every week. So, we'll talk.
Hey, think about it, man. There might be people in your audience that have been waiting 37 episodes to hear that. So that you finally gave them what they were looking for. How to distribute audio files across podcast networks.
Could be. I mean, just interestingly enough, and this always just mesmerizes me. So again, I started back in July. I've got 37 episodes now. What's nice about having it via Spotify and the other platforms is it gives me all sorts of demographic and just random data. As a data geek, this is the kind of stuff that I really get excited about. So little things like, this podcast has been streamed at least one time in 16 different countries, which is insane.
Really cool.
We just added Switzerland for the first time last week, which just blows me away. So somebody, for example, in El Salvador listened to an episode. I'm like,
was Daniel traveling to Switzerland and El Salvador?
That's right. I have Daniel on a world tour to stream at least once in every country. I told him backpack across Europe, Central America, South America, and just take care of it. So I have 5 continents so far. I've mentioned this before. I'm only too short. So I'm short of Antarctica, which, as I've said before, I don't know their infrastructure, so I'm not sure anybody in Antarctica will ever listen to this. And I'm short Africa as well, which one of my coworkers has a lot of family apparently in Africa, so he said he'll try to hook me up. So that's definitely a box I want to check off. So we'll see.
No, that's so cool though, man. Honestly, congratulations. I know we're joking around and stuff like that, but I'm sure when you first got started, there was this whole idea of I'm just going to try this and let's see how it goes. And I'm sure there were people at our company that were kind of, just saying, just try it, just do it. And now look at you, man. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, it was my current manager, Gina, who heard me on the other podcast about a year ago and was like, you should do it. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to, how would I do it? And that's kind of what kind of inspired me to do it. So shout out to Gina if she's listening right now. And from there, every time I tell her like, hey, thanks again, she's like, oh, you would have done it anyway. I'm like, I'm not so sure that I would have. Because
hey, that's why you keep people around you that support you and build you up, right? You never know what doors it opens up.
100%. I mean, not surprisingly, I'm a 60% male audience. I'm sure, there's definitely a female, out there that is interested in what I talk about, but a lot of it is, wrestling and sports cards, whatever. So I get that it leans a little male. From an age perspective, what's interesting too is not surprisingly less than 1% are under 17, probably my kids or their friends or something like that. Mostly we're looking at like 35 to 59, which, I mean, being the age that I am makes total sense, right? It is what it is, right? To me, I'm sure a 17-year-old is like, he's an old guy. What does he have to offer? I don't know. So, I mean, it's just funny how life works, right? Like, I remember back to when I was in high school, would I listen to a guy in his 40s or 50s just kind of like blabbering off about stuff? I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, life is weird. It's crazy to think what our assumptions were about people our age now, and it's like, no, we're young cats, right?
Yeah, I mean, what 50 is the new 30 or something like that. They was talking about, right? Something else I wanted to bring up also was an article that I found on you, Jissan. It was from last year, I believe it was. Leadership Legends: 5 most inspiring entrepreneurs making a difference in 2024. So obviously, anytime I see like the top X or the top Y, I always find it interesting. But being that you were ranked one of the top 5 most inspiring entrepreneurs in 2024, how do you top that in 2025? Like that's a really high benchmark to kind of like beat against, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. So basically, there is no topping that. I'm super proud of, the fact that someone recognized me for that. I think it was more this craziness of retiring at 40 and claiming that you're doing something, that's about personal development and people development, and you're doing something about, giving back. And honestly, the purpose of our brand, right? And I didn't mention this, but it's to develop the next generation of inclusive leaders. Like flat out, like all I care about is finding as many people to share what I've learned. And the thing is, I learned it later in my career, whereas I wish someone would have just told me this right at the beginning, because there's so many doors it would open up if I just had that knowledge. So, I don't know why I would have to wait to become a director to be able to get some sort of leadership workshop that all of a sudden reveal personal branding.
Right.
It's like, share this with, undergraduates, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm doing. So yeah, I'm definitely not going to beat that benchmark. That's pretty cool.
It's a tough one. I mean, it sounds like, obviously you've had a hot 7 months or whatever. It sounds like you have a lot of great things coming up too. So whether it be that or something else, I'm sure, the sky's the limit for you. So looking forward to seeing where you end up.
Hey, I'm telling you, man, trying to get to 4 guest appearances on your show is definitely, what I'm trying to go for in terms of, the record, right? And
yeah, it's a great goal to get to. I think definitely, we can definitely get there. Daniel's at 3. We're working towards 4. I have a few people at 2 looking towards 3. Last week's episode, I had Lithia on for the second time. So
nice.
Definitely, giving people time. If people have different stories, I mean, this is all about people's stories, their experiences, what they've learned from, what they can share, what they're comfortable sharing, stuff like that. So obviously you have, decades of stories to share. I'd imagine, even 6 months from now, when your business is that much higher than it is today, talking about like, hey, how we went from X to, X exponentially, whatever, kind of sharing out what that looks like, which would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be so cool.
Awesome. So we do have a few minutes left, and I know we did briefly talk earlier about like your love of basketball and collectibles and stuff like that. Do you have any collections of things that you enjoy? So like anything that you either look at on eBay or you look at in stores, and you're like, I need that, so you just go get it. Like, what do you like?
Yeah, you talked about this whole idea of like eventually we just became these kids that had money that we can just go get the stuff we always dreamed about but we never could, right? So for me, it was always sports memorabilia. So I'm crazy about auctions, sports auctions, and jumping in on sports memorabilia. So I have, a wild collection of, signed footballs and basketballs, and I got, Magic Johnson, I got Hakeem Olajuwon, I got, Pat Mahomes, and a few others. And it's just, literally my wife's like, this is a waste of money. And I'm trying to explain to her, this is an investment. Like these people are going to be, continuing to break records. And for some reason they scribbled on this thing with a marker. So therefore it's valuable. I'm probably talking to myself about it, but yeah, like, sports memorabilia has always been cool. I think basketball cards, there's something very young and primal about this idea that I used to have a binder with a bunch of sleeves in it and a bunch of cards, and it was tucked in my backpack, and I would take it to school and we would be swapping cards when we were young. And for some reason, I just can't get rid of them. Right. And I know I'm never going to get them all PSA graded. I heard about your Cena experience with second guessing whether or not you should ever get anything PSA graded. Right. But
that's right.
I have this thing around like, I'm going to do something with this one day, but I just can't figure out what it is. And I have literally shoeboxes full of cards that are not in any kind of protective sleeve. It's just rows of cards.
Yes.
And every now and then I look through it and I was like, oh yeah, Sean Kemp. It's like, oh yeah, Muggsy Bogues. It's like, this is like cool stuff in here,
Yeah. So I had a similar experience. So first of all, I have an attic full of autographed wrestling action figures, which I can guarantee you have little to no value, but to me, they look cool. And when I eventually move in retirement, then I have a whole like man cave, they'll definitely go up.
There you go.
Secondly, your shoebox of cards probably won't PSA grade very well, so I would suggest you don't do that. But what I will say though is, so it was probably a few years ago that like I mean I grew up, I was always a big baseball fan. I've like had boxes and boxes of baseball cards, all commons, all base cards, whatever else like that. Probably about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago during the pandemic or whatever, I was like, these are just taking up space. They give me no happiness. I just need to get rid of them because I don't care. Also, at this point in life, I just don't like baseball at all. So a friend of a friend's son, I think, collected cards. And I was like, hey, does your kid want these? Because I was like, they do nothing for me, but if they give him happiness, that's amazing. So he's got all these, 1980s baseball cards, which, again, I mean, it's the most oversaturated probably collection of cards. That 80s had so many different manufacturers, and like they're not really worth much anyway. Okay, so fast forward a year or two later, and I was watching, I don't know, a video or something, and somebody was showing like the slab cards, and I was like, wow, I need these, right? All the PSA graded stuff. So I've since started buying some just random slabbed PSA graded cards from the 80s and 90s. Not because they're really worth anything, but because I'm like, hey, I used to have that as a raw card. I was like, whatever. So like I always wanted like a Don Mattingly rookie. So I bought a Don Mattingly rookie. Yeah. I always wanted the Michael Jordan White Sox baseball card. So I just went and bought that. So a bunch of them that like, mostly sub $100 cards, but things that like, they give me happiness. It's not getting boxes and boxes. It's being selective. The Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card, right? It's one of those classic cards of all time. Stuff like that I have in a box or a binder of some kind right now. I don't know how I'll display it, but for me, it just gives me happiness knowing that I have these cards at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Like I have a few Jordan 45 when he came back in that jersey, right? And it's like, this is awesome. I remember where I was when this happened, and this card is here, and I got it, and I've literally been traveling around the world. And it's literally come with me everywhere I go because I just have this weird thing around. I don't want to leave it behind anywhere because I'm afraid someone's going to just take the box and trash it. So as I'm moving from Vietnam to Poland and stuff like that, I'm like gently carrying these things and just putting them in the corner of a closet and leaving them there for years and then just carrying it nicely to the next spot. But yeah, it's this weird thing that, it just brings me joy.
Yeah, as you're going through customs, so like, do you have anything to declare? And you're like, I have a Michael Jordan 45 card. Do you want to see it? Like, nah, you walk by. It's okay. You're cool.
Yeah, I want to declare I'm immature. I have a bunch of stuff from my childhood that I carry around. Yeah.
It's awesome. With that said, we are getting towards the end of this show. So we've definitely said a lot. We've shared a lot, maybe too much. Who knows? But with that said, you do have, again, a company. You've got a lot of different projects. Anything you want to reiterate support for or kind of, bring awareness to or ways people can reach you?
No, look, I think you can follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I just focus all of my energy there because it just feels like the right place. The one thing I would say is just continue to bet on people. If you're a people leader or if you're a person that manages teams, there's a lot of performance anxiety all the time. And there's a lot of financials and things like that. Don't lose sight of helping people and developing people. I think that's honestly what the purpose of my company is. And I think there's going to be a lot of great people that come up in this culture if the managers and the people that are in charge are nurturing it the right way, right? And I think it undermines a lot of potential if you don't.
Of course. Yeah, well said. And again, I want to reiterate my appreciation for what you did for me personally in your previous life. And also just it seems like you're on the right path, right? You're being your authentic self. You're helping others in the way that you've always helped others, but now you're doing it, under your own brand as opposed to a more larger corporate brand. So it's just amazing to see.
No, I appreciate it, Jeff, and thank you for the opportunity. This is always fun. I'll be listening in keenly on all your other stuff going on. So I'm a proud supporter.
I appreciate it. So with that said, everybody, once again, as a reminder, I'll be off for the next few weeks, probably traveling the country, not the world like Jissan, but I'll be staying across the continental 48 for the most part. You can always check out the show on Instagram at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can check out my personal Instagram at Seltzer77. As we don't have any shows taped yet for May, if you want to be a future guest, definitely reach out to me, DM me, let me know. Or if you have any ideas for this show or any questions or comments, definitely leave me a comment or a DM. Once again, the show is sponsored by my friends over at JeffSeltzer.com. For all your Jeff Seltzer needs, always check out JeffSeltzer.com. If you want to reach out to the show directly via email to send business inquiries or anything else like that, email the show at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. Reminder, we're on all podcast platforms, but you probably know that because you've been listening to us for the last 48 and a half minutes at this point. So Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all the good places. With that said, have an amazing month. Reach out to me. I'll have some merch coming out soon, so keep an eye out on the old Instagram. Take care, everyone, and have a great month.